So this is bookshelf number 2, and it's also where I keep a lot of my knickknacks. This is actually a Beanie Baby made to celebrate Canada's 150th this year. Its name is Maple. The friend who got it for me decided to name it Maple Rose, which I think is kind of funny. So I will just move this stuff out of the way. And down on the end here, I have my New Canadian Library edition of Canadian poetry from the beginnings to the First World War, selected with an afterword by Carol Grierson and Gwendolyn Davies. This is a book that I had for a Can Lit class a few years back, and it's one of my favorites in terms of poetry. Then I have a copy of Moby Dick that I've yet to read. The Dictator's Handbook by Bruce Bowen de Mesquita and Alistair Smith. I have not read this yet. This was a Christmas gift. I've been meaning to get to it. My copy of Sex and the Single Girl by Helen Gurley Brown. The Age of Reason by Sartre. I haven't read this yet, but I love the cover. I have my copy of The Plague by Albert Camus, which I started reading in late December, early January, and set down, never got back to. Iron in the Soul, also by Sartre. And then I have my copy of Strunk and White's The Elements of Style, which is, of course, a classic. Here we are at my Isabel Allende. We have Of Love and Shadows, Eva Luna, and The House of the Spirits. Next to that is my copy of The Trial by Franz Kafka, Charmed Circle, Gertrude Stein and Company by James R. Mello. I have not read that one yet. Let's get the candlesticks out of the way. Bertrand Russell's Why I'm Not a Christian. Have not read this one either. A lot of this shelf is things that I will be reading in the near future. I have Heidegger and the Quest for Truth, a great vintage edition there. Also have not read it. Simone de Beauvoir's The Blood of Others, which I have read, and it's right next to my copy of Sartre's Nausea. Marx and de Courtevin, New French Feminisms. Haven't read this yet either. At the Existentialist Cafe, Freedom Being and Apricot Cocktails by Sarah Bakewell. I have read that one. Simone de Beauvoir, Adieu, A Farewell to Sartre. Force of Circumstance, also by de Beauvoir. Followed by The Woman Destroyed by de Beauvoir. That one I haven't read. She Came to Stay, which is a great vintage paperback as well. I have read that one, and The Mandarins, also in a delightful vintage paperback. This was the first de Beauvoir that I read. And once again, the fun part of adjusting this so that you can see. So down to the next level of the shelf. This is where I have my Gabriel Garcia Marquez and a couple of other knickknacks. So I have my Casablanca flask, my grandfather's baby cup that I now keep elastic bands in and I really should polish. Cinnamon sugar shaker, that was my grandmother's, my bibliophile mug that I've retired from drinking tea in. But the books. I have Alice Munro's Who Do You Think You Are, which is my favorite collection of her short stories. I have my vintage edition of Elizabeth Smart's by Grand Central Station, I Sat Down and Wept, which is a great book, by the way. In my last bookshelf tour, I showed a more contemporary edition of that book, which I have sent off to one of my lovely viewers a couple days ago. My copy of Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. I really love this hardback edition. It's got Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable on the cover. They, of course, starred in the 1939 movie adaptation. Journals of Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath collected poems. This is just a notebook of notes from one of my classes. I have Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground in a Barnes & Noble edition that I picked up years ago when I was in the States. I think I was a teenager still. I have The Dust Jacket for the Empty Canvas. I think that book is somewhere in this room, but Roxana by Daniel Defoe. I bought this one for the cover. Nietzsche, Twilight of the Idols and the Antichrist. Bookmarking that, haven't finished it. Then I have some Latin American literature here. I have Gabriella, Clove and Cinnamon by Giorgio Armando. Haven't read that one yet. Donna Flor and Her Two Husbands. Also haven't read it. The Marble Dance by Leguia Faguendes Teles. This I did read last fall, and I did a review for it. An Evil Hour by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. That one I have not read, but I have read The General in His Labyrinth. Memories of My Melancholy Horse. The Autumn of the Patriarch. And I've got Love in the Time of Cholera kind of stuck up there. Comparing Democracies and Emily Carr's collected works, which I picked up in Vancouver. She is, of course, a very famous Canadian artist, known for her paintings of totem poles in western BC. This is a book I picked up when I toured Parliament. It's on the Library of Parliament, kind of a souvenir. But yeah, Autumn of the Patriarch, which I have read. Chronicle of a Death Foretold, I've also read. Of Love and Other Demons, which I've read. News of a Kidnapping, also read. Innocent Erendira, read that as well. Clandestine in Chile, very good. In a New York review. Wow, my mind is going blank. It's in this edition. New York Review of Books edition, I think. Leaf Storm, which I've read, and then on the end there, 100 Years of Solitude, which I've read, and a biography of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which I've also read, and Love in the Time of Cholera should go back where it belongs. Okay, so now the challenge is the bottom shelf here, which is on the difficult side to get to because there is a bed in the way and a yoga mat. So on the bottom shelf here, you can see a few books in my record collection off to the side, but on the bottom shelf here, I have my copy of The Catcher in the Rye, Sinclair Lewis's The Jungle. That has been on my shelf for years, haven't read it yet. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which I have read twice and loved. Contemporary Canadian Federalism, Foundations, Traditions and Institutions. That was a textbook for class, and it's very good. This was kind of a gag gift for Christmas from one of my closest friends. I am a teaching assistant, and he would jokingly call me Professor Amy when I was going to hold office hours, and so he got this as a joke. His mother, who's a professor, said to me, "Just don't let any of the real professors see that." The Bridges of Madison County by Robert James Waller. The Red Leather Diary by Lily Copel. That one I've been meaning to read. Othello in a Pelican edition. Macbeth, which is my favorite Shakespeare play, also in a Pelican edition. I just realized you can't really see it that well down there. I have Lolita and Resistance, Rebellion, and Death by Albert Camus. As you can see, I'm kind of running out of space here. Blackout by Hubert Aiquin. I have a review of that on my channel. The Antiphonary, also by Aiquin. And Next Episode, also by Aiquin. I have reviews of both of those books. The Book of Imaginary Beings by Jorge Luis Borges. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. The Invention of Morel by Adolfo Bioy Casares. A phallic novel by Alberto Moravia. I ditched the Just Jacket because it was a library discard. Two Adolescents by Alberto Moravia. Two Women, also by Alberto Moravia. Then I have From Ink Lake, which is a collection of Canadian short stories. The Razor's Edge by Somerset. Now is the Hour by Tom Spanbauer in a beautiful hardcover. Next to I Loved You More, also by Spanbauer. Both of these are two of the best books I have ever read. Then I've got Augustine's political writings on the end there, Aristotle's Politics, The Republic of Plato. The only reason I'm holding on to those is because I expect to hand them off to a friend who will be taking the same political theory course that I took last fall. Then I have a couple of books on the end there. Taru by Stephanie R. Sorensen and Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson. Those two were gifts, and I have not gotten to reading them yet, and I really should. So that is my second bookshelf. And that's about all I have here in Ottawa. As I said in my last video, I have only about a third of the books I own here in Ottawa. The rest are at my parents' place, and I guess I'm going to be slowly bringing them out here to Ottawa, getting rid of a few more because I don't think it's fair to leave two great big bookshelves of books at my parents' place when nothing else that belongs to me is left there.